Very well. Jen, I'm going to give it over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. All right.
It's a full house this morning. So glad you all could come out this morning. My name is Jen. I'll be moderating this morning. And welcome to this morning session, Building a Tribe in a Disconnected World. I'm going to introduce our speaker this morning. Raynard Packard describes himself as a native son with a split pedigree. This seems accurate coming from a man who has at different points in his life been a Dogtown era skateboarder, Olympic torchbearer, come on in, drug addict, paratrooper, doctoral student, dedicated marathoner, triathlete, and a licensed counselor. Let me take a minute and rest before I go on because that's a lot of stuff. Let's just absorb that. That's awesome. He is most well known for starting a nonprofit organization in Africa called the Packard Institute, which helps clients mostly in their late teens and early 20s recover from addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, your speaker, Raynard Packard.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I did not write that. But, and welcome everyone. And the gods have been kind. Rain is holding off. And I'd like to also thank Miami University, Aaron in particular, for the organization of this event. It's if you've ever been on board with conferences, it's a terrific logistic challenge, but they seem to have pulled it off, right? And I'd also like to introduce my co-presenter, Magdalena Packard. Magdalena is she co-presented last year and was invited. They didn't invite me. They invited her back this year. So you have the great good fortune of working with Magdalena. This is sacred country. This is sacred. We are in the Shawnee Nation. And it is an honor to be before you because Ohio has a tradition that predates traditional recovery by hundreds of years. This is the Shawnee Nation. And we have nothing in Ohio except for some significant organic talent. And I'm looking at a room full of, you want a pan? A room full of some of the most gifted, uniquely empowering souls that our state can bring together, I guarantee you. And really, again, as Jen mentioned, my training is more traditional as a counselor and as a psychologist, but I'm here to tell you, we're going to have to bring some real organic juice, soul to bear in this current crisis. Again, when I talk about sort of our tradition, and I want to talk about my Shawnee brother, Tenskwatawa, who was also a brother of Tecumseh. And Tenskwatawa was a misfit in his tribe at that time. He was kind of a useless, boastful, arrogant, stinking drunk. And he had a spiritual experience. Actually, he was, as the lore has it, he was standing around his campfire, boasting about his exploits in battle, of which he did not participate. And, railing against this and that and another thing. And he fell into the fire. And he had this spiritual experience, and from that moment forward, he was transformed. And he became a fierce warrior, fighting the children of the evil spirit, which would be us white folks, actually. Kind of an impressive looking guy. Tenskwatawa would form what, for his tribe, became the Shawnee recovery tradition. And it was a talk therapy that they used in their tribe. Those traditions continue to this day. And in fact, I was just in Portsmouth, also part of the extended Shawnee Nation, and I was at a meeting, a recovery meeting, and there was this kid sitting next to me, and he was kind of sweating, And when the comments came around, he passed. And the meeting was actually called the Shawnee meeting. And I mentioned something about Tenskwatawa. Marta, do you have that water, please? And again, when the comments came around, he passed. And at the end of the meeting, we stood, held hands, said the Lord's Prayer, and he said, "Hey man, I got to talk to you." And he said, "I'm a Shawnee Brave, and I've really been struggling, and I did not know of my tradition. So bring your unique gift to bear." Again, my practice, and I came in 26 years ago, young counselor. My first job was in Ohio's first Supermax, TCI, which has now been ruled cruel and unusual punishment. We had a mental health, an inpatient mental health unit there, and this is where Ohio at the time sent all their serial killers. And I came in a young, idealistic counselor, free the brothers. Man, I left out of that internship, man. I'm glad those guys are in there. Believe me. These are people that had some, these were truly some wounded spirits. But, my career to date has encompassed a lot of traditional approaches, both in clinical counseling, psychotherapy. I've worked in private practice settings, of course, largely with adolescent populations, IOPs, inpatient mental health, inpatient substance abuse. For 12 years, I ran the City of Akron's adolescent counseling services in the City of Akron through their health department. And something happened in the mid-aughts, do we call them the aughts? 2006, 2007. I don't know about any of you. And this is not to impugn the astonishing gifts you all bring to bear, but we are working in a system that is fundamentally broken. All of you do this breathtakingly passionate job, and when you release your clients and you give them the phone number, I need you to call, if you're aftercare or whatever. It is a system that is fundamentally designed to make people fail. And you must be the generation of truth tellers. Call it like you see it. The good news, and I don't want this to be a down buzz, so to speak, the good news is that we have some allies in the recovery community. And again, in the aughts, there was a think tank centered largely around Connecticut, William White, and I'm going to give you some resources, connect you to some resources. And there's a lot of wonderful open source resources, stuff that we can, as clinicians and as prevention people, we can use in our practice. It's very real, it's very powerful, and when I was here last year, Tracy Plock, our OMAS director, she had put all the counties of Ohio on notice. You will integrate recovery-oriented systems of care, or we're going to pull your funding. So, we're a little late. We're a little behind the ball in terms of adopting. We're not early adopters of this. Again, around 06, 07, William White and the Connecticut group, Great Lakes, Philadelphia, there were these pockets of resistance. And I'm here to tell you, this has been a recovery revolution. And we are bringing some juice to the fire. And if your agency or agencies haven't adopted recovery-oriented systems of care, I would encourage you to explore the many astonishing resources and honor our tradition as Ohioans, as healers, And if you're noticing the light back music, this is the healing music of the Shawnee tradition. Part of what I did, and this is also comes out after working, decades with adolescents, is I needed a brand. And a lot of my young clients came from a gang background. So if that's where they sensed that connection, then let's give them a gang. Let's give them a more positive peer culture. So we've emerged as the misfits. And believe me, I've had colleagues, people that I love and have trained, approach me and say, hey, I see the misfits all over town, and they're doing these cool things. Why do you call them misfits? I mean, can't you call them something a little more positive or a little more uplifting? And I guess that I can only say we have to honor, our sense of self. We have to be authentic. And in that sense, again, I would encourage you, if you're working particularly with young people, I mean, we all need to feel that sense of connection. Anyone here watched Johann Hari's TED Talk? The paradigm, the opposite of addiction, Johann says, is not sobriety, in fact. But he suggests perhaps the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's what we decided to offer when we launched on May Day, 2007. A place for people to connect and be who they were. Instead of not that, I mean, I wish all the people I work with could be, run 100 marathons or do whatever. They need to be exactly who they are. And I felt I needed to create a context within which they could feel safe to be who they are. The Institute we do have a brand, the Misfit brand. I mean, we do a lot of outward bound style, adventure-oriented and experiential therapies, along with recovery-oriented systems of care. But we all need a tribe, and we all need to be functionally who we are. And full disclosure here, I came into working with adolescents, at least, with a distinct advantage in that I grew up in a downtrodden beachside town called Venice in the 70s. And this was purely an accident of geography and of timing, really. But my little crew would later become kind of lionized in the media as the Lords of Dogtown or Dogtown and Z-Boys. And here's my crew. And this is, I wish I could find some of these cats on Facebook now. This is me and my boys. If you noticed, we were all highly individualized. That's why individualists. That's why we all had exactly the same socks on. And this is the old Venice Pavilion. It's long since been torn down. But the Z-Boys, again, to adults, it means essentially nothing. But I mean, to a skateboard kid, I could be Henry Kissinger, and that would not be more, impressive. So trust me, it's strictly an accident of geography and timing, history as it were. But the Z-Boys, and we were misfits, all of us, all from broken homes, all from homes where abandonment and neglect and substance use disorders were present. For a time, we lived in a van down by the river, right? Well, it was actually in a van at the parking lot at Oceanfront Walk and Rose Avenue, which was, if you're going to live in a van, that's the parking lot you want to live in, believe me. But, that's neither here nor there. I am who I am because of the choices that I made. And I still skate, by the way. Skate for life. So that's part of our brand, and that's part of what we do. This, by the way, is a bangle. Is anybody here familiar with the bangles?
I bet she is.
It is one person raised their hand. Hey, Mom, you want to tell them about the bangles?
Our house? Or just bangles?
Bangles.
Well, Bengals is a breed of hybrid cat of an Asian leopard cat and an unknown breed, just a normal stray. And breeders started breeding them because they didn't want people capturing wild cats from the wild and taking them in and then abandoning them, ditching them somewhere they don't know. So we created them to look like wild cats, so people would get them and not have to have a wild cat.
That sounds about right. Thank you. Awesome. There's a method to this, because when we launched in 2007, I decided that animals were going to be part of my tribe. And I met through the internet this local breeder of Bengals. And she says, you have to check out these cats. They're actually, they look very cool, but they're actually bred for personality. And indeed, she donated, and these are expensive. Trust me, I could never in my life afford these cats. But she donated a couple of Bengals to the Institute. And Bengals have been an integral part of all of our operations, our residential operations and our outpatient since. And this is now it's in the data, because we do outcome studies wherein, we ask what part of, the service here, had an impact on you, what was meaningful. And I could nail it every time. It was the cats. It was the cat that crawled up with me at night and tucked in with me. And we know that it reduces heart rate and lowers blood pressure, and these Bengals are something else. By the way, that woman 10 years ago that donated the two Bengals, she's now my partner, and so I'm keeping the resource in network, and so I don't have to pay for the cats, pretty much. But they're enormously engaging animals, very intuitive. We do groups, we do circle, wherein the Bengals will come out, and they'll do a couple of rotations of the circle, and they'll figure out who's the most needful, who has the most, who needs the most love, and almost, with unerring sensibility, they go and sit on that person or person's laps. So it's, if you have the opportunity in your practice, I've got to tell you, we do equine therapy. My partner also breeds a range of exotic animals, the fennec fox, for instance. They've all been part of our culture, and I have to recommend it again. Our outcome studies say that this can be just a wonderful dimension of your healing practice. Again, sorry to be a down buzz, but this is in addition to being the Shawnee Nation, this is a national hotspot. We all know this. The surrounding counties, Dayton. Again, in 26 years, I haven't seen. I'm sure none of us have anything to compare it to. I did go through the seminary, but I don't remember the class on how to do a eulogy, or how to sit with a grieving mother and tell her that this is somehow part of God's will. Because I don't think it is. I really don't believe that. And by the way, the billboard, we've gone way off the chart. We don't even have space for the numbers. This is this time last year, and we're above 1,000 now. I would suggest that it's not the opiates, it's not the heroin, it's not the fentanyl, now morphing into crystal meth again. It's us. It's our seeming inability to connect through the generations, to engage our younger souls in a meaningful, impactful way. And there are no simple solutions, but I'm here to tell you this is a room full of solution focus. And again, in my practice, it is strength-based, client-centered, and it's about teasing out those good and amazing true gifts that all of you possess. And you are exactly the people to do it. again, there's nothing to compare it to. The only thing I could think, if these deaths were Ebola, for instance, or the Zika virus, we would drop the 82nd Airborne on this county. I'm in a position to know. I was in the 82nd Airborne, and we certainly jumped for much less than the thousands of Ohioans who are perishing. So when it was spoke to very eloquently this morning, we have to be the agent of change in this catastrophe. Each of you, I imbue you. Bring your gift to bear in this catastrophe. You cannot do it alone. Again, as we launched in 2007, it was with the specific design to integrate clinical counseling, surely, with recovery-oriented systems of care, more specifically, recovery coaching. So if you have access to recovery coaches, if you can integrate them at any level, they will become, and excuse me if I use a lot of military language, they will become your force multipliers. That is to say, you bring a couple of recovery coaches into the battle space, and 3 now equals a dozen or more. Your force multipliers. They can go places. They can do things. They can be an agent of change the way us office-bound, set in our ways clinicians simply just, we can't do because of HIPAA or whatever. There's no right or wrong. Well, my recovery coaches can affect change. And I'll just give you a story from this week. A young guy who was actually in our academy started having a psychotic break. And I had to triangulate with his parents and different, I got him over to our Summit County's psychiatric stabilization unit, and they could not take him because they said he was not a danger to the community. Okay, we'll follow the rules. And again, I'm triangulating with the parents last week. Let's get him over to Akron General. And I had the parents sitting in the emergency room, waiting room, the entire day, right? End of the day, an intern comes out and says, well, this is substance use disorder. We can't treat this. This is, you're going to have to get them connected to a mental health type piece. So the parents in tears and in frustration, he wanders off into the end of the night, later to be picked up on the floor of a Walmart bathroom, weeping inconsolably, from this episode. Believe me, now I'm getting hot. And I'm sure each of you has equally, as compelling and stories. Picked up off the Walmart bathroom, sent back to psych unit. Finally, they take him because the police brought him. 5 days on the psych unit, he's released. And I'm not going to impugn the attending physician's protocol, but I don't know, ketamine, MDMA, I'm not sure that that's the exact intervention he needed. But anyways, that night, upon release, he overdoses. Again, this is like the 3rd or 4th time he's overdosed. And at that time, he goes to the Barberton ER, Barberton, Ohio, which for me is a game changer. Because if anyone shows up as of midnight, June 16th, if anyone shows up at the Barberton ER with a substance use challenge, they are automatically assigned a recovery coach through the Packard Institute. And that's the game changer. And this is a model that we've seen out of Connecticut. And again, as an agent of change, we clinicians have nothing, more empowering than that peer-to-peer dynamic. And I think Bill and Bob figured that out 83 years ago and conceived what would later become known as the Fellowship, 12-Step Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. So he's now under the care of a recovery coach. And this guy is running defense for the parents. He's coordinating care. He knows what waiting rooms you'll sit in. Your recovery coaches know the places that don't return phone calls. Your recovery coaches know the dead ends. Why? Because they have the lived experience. They've sat in the waiting rooms. They've been turned away for insurance, myriad Byzantine issues. Your recovery coaches can be your game changers. So where do we find these force multipliers? The state of Ohio is doing the best that they can, I am sure. Sorry, I heard a laugh back there, but talk about unreturned phone calls or emails. So this is not only an indictment of our behavioral health care system, it's kind of an indictment of our healthcare system. But let's face it, and you need to be the truth tellers. This generation of healers need to tell the truth, because when we're done billing, we're done. Right? That's the reality. When we're done billing you, we are done with you. And to deny that would be to deny our fundamental humanity, because that is the system. And you guys need to be the door kickers. That's what I was in the airborne. I was the door. I kicked the door open and let the other guys rush in. So the Institute launched in 2007. We immediately fielded recovery coaches, and I've been singing the praises for 10 years now. Flash forward 10 years, 2017, Tracy Clout comes on board. You guys need to integrate this at the county level, or I'm going to pull your funding. So we work with what we have. I'll tell you a little story about this car. You mind? I love cars. I'm a Packard, right? From the Ohio Packards. In Warren, we started Packard Automobiles. So this is a 1948 Packard Victoria convertible. All right, and it has some Ohio. It has an Ohio legacy. Purchased new here in Ohio by Johnny Lee Singer. Johnny Lee was the dean, known as the dean of big bands. He toured the world with this car. Worked with Frank Sinatra. Worked with all the greats. Johnny Lee is basically a one-owner car because he drove that car until his death at age 96 in the year 2006. So at which point his son inherits the car, Eric Singer, another Ohio son. He drums for a band called Kiss. So Eric gets the car, and at the time it's a real POS. It was brown, actually, like rust colored when I got it from Eric. So we towed it from Los Angeles, got it back here, got that Cadillac mother of pearl, finish on it, and that's our flagship. We did this very deliberately because the days, I don't know if anyone, I'm not an expert on HIPAA, believe me. I know this about HIPAA. I know that I've had young clients die on the steps of St. Thomas Hospital for want of a release. That's what I know about HIPAA. And I hope, again, that you are the generation of pushback. For once, let's just do something that works. So that's my little piece. I'm not going to aneurysm over HIPAA, but part of recovery-oriented systems of care is advocacy. Advocacy for the recovery community, because as long as we treat ourselves as second-class citizens, that's the kind of health care we can expect. Anybody here seen The Anonymous People, the film? 1, 2. If you get a chance, it's on Netflix. The Anonymous People. It is about part of the recovery revolution. It is about bringing, at a very organic, ground level, these amazing resources to bear. Again, as an agent of change, my recovery coaches have no peer as an agent of change. to me, the opus, the central tome of this movement can be contained in this book, Recovery Rising, just released. If you don't know about William White, he is my guru, as it were. Most of his stuff can be accessed open source at williamwhitepapers.com. And I'm talking about recovery residence manuals. I'm talking about, clear, practical, useful manuals, open source for your use. But if you get a chance, this is very readable. It's condensed into, a compendium of maybe 5 decades of clinical practice, research, and teaching. He's a beautiful guy. He's down in Florida now. If you get an opportunity, go see him at the Multiple Pathways conference this October in Florida. I'm sure you can link to any of that. He is he articulates in ways that it just blows my mind. Every page is like, dang, man, I wish I would have said that. I've been thinking that for 10 years. I'll give you a handful of links today, but I can give you no more powerful than William White. I assure you. So building tribe. Again, a lot of the youth or the younger adults I'd worked with had gang affiliations, and ultimately what we're working against, or what we're working with resistance, right? What we're working with is the hijacked brain. We are talking about the inability, anhedonia, the inability to experience simple human pleasure along a continuum that we all understand. The laughter of a child. Can you imagine if that was just absent from your human experience? Just anhedonia. So that's what we're up against, right? That instinct that says to the person struggling, if I don't have this, I'm going to die. So we have to offer things, and again, this is not to impugn our current treatment system as it's, it is. But we have to offer something equal or greater than the compelling siren's call of opiate drugs. We have to offer them a world, a tactile world, equal or greater than the compelling nature of crystal meth. And it's a hard sell. And it's one of the things that we have to partner with the treatment communities, just to get our people's brain stabilized, for starters. But you've all seen it, and I'm sure you've all seen it a dozen times at least. It's day 29. And I know, is anyone familiar with Sam Quinones? You've read his book, Dreamland. It's another one I would have to recommend, because it's centered largely in Ohio, in Portsmouth, in fact, which acted as a nexus for the epidemic. Sam said, and by the way, Sam's an old punk rock OG from LA. Sam said that the most dangerous day in an addict's life is the day that she's released from treatment. Think about it. In terms of your own tolerance to the chemical of choice, your lack of recovery supports. Sure, the office-bound clinician slid the phone number across the desk and said, hey, give this IOP a call. They'll take care of you. I don't know, you guys have to be the truth tellers, really. I've been sounding this alarm for 10 years. I'm passing the torch to you. Misfits. The misfits. If you could get them out there playing softball, which is what we're doing here, do it. If you could get them onto the river, rivers. Has anyone kayaked locally here? Wow. Little Miami? I hear that's the bomb. Unfortunately, I didn't rack a kayak this time out, but I definitely have it in my bucket list. Rivers are the metaphor, that is the metaphor for recovery, if there ever was one. That twisting, you don't know what's around the curve. You don't know when you're going to hit rapids. It helps if you work as a team. And again, to me, it's always been the perfect metaphor for recovery. So that's become part of our Misfit brand, the kayaking. In fact, we tend to wind up, on our madcap adventures in some media context or another. But back to the recovery-oriented systems of care, this is the rebrand on HIPAA, right? Because we're not beholden, in supervising recovery coaches, we're not beholden to the same HIPAA regulations yet. And we can represent in ways that you just can't do with clinical clients. So each Christmas, and we do it as families, we go down the main street of our cities, in the parades, in the 4th of July parade, in the Christmas parade. This is the face of recovery. The media does a bang-up job, with the lady passed out in the car, right? That image is indelibly seared in our consciousness. What they don't do a good job of is the thousands of transformational, I'm going to say it, miracles that you've all been a part of. That's not part of the current narrative. And I indict a certain thread in 12-step communities for that. They're working from a playbook that can be interpreted much differently. Again, trust me, I'm a big fan. I can shoot an arrow out my office window and hit Dr. Bob's grave. That's how close I am to the brother. Big fan. This summer, I will celebrate 26 years continuous uninterrupted sobriety. So, all glory to the Great Spirit. When I came to in an Army hospital, this just wasn't in the draft. This just was not in the draft. So, in the original draft. The faces and voices of recovery, and I think we need to talk about that a little bit. Say it loud and say it proud. That singular, monolithic, voice of hope. So if you have people you can organize, bring under your wing, and field to start to change the narrative. And it's all about reducing stigma. All about reducing stigma. Seems to me, there was parity voted, signed into law at some point. I don't know if you guys see it, but I don't see insurance companies reimbursing for substance use disorders. After the big, the boom, of which I was a beneficiary of the 28-day model. To be fair, full disclosure, that's long gone. And what we're dealing with is the addicted brain. What we're dealing with is the hijacked brain. So until we start fundamentally rethinking the way we invoke treatment and recovery services, we are setting people up to fail. First counselor, do no harm. Because on that 29th day, when all of her tolerance is down, and if you slide that thin phone number across the desk, you could be signing someone's death warrant. We just have to tell it like it is. Please peel off the mask. Again, say it loud and proud. We represent as part of the recovery community. Now, there is another 12-step interpretation. There is a tradition of anonymity. And a lot of times we're working with those sensibilities. And again, not to impugn, because I'm down, all right? But you can reinterpret that tradition of anonymity to mean simply principles before personalities, basically. Ohio peers. Again, I salute the state for finally, bringing things up to speed. I train recovery they're currently calling them Ohio Peer Recovery Specialists.
Yes, it's a combination of the mental health and the substance use, because it's integrated training.
Right, integrated
Just
model.
a C card, and they have the mental health, and so they're certified peer recovery supporters.
Right, right. It's that's a big thing to chew off in a 40-hour training model.
Plus 16 hours online.
Ah, let's not forget.
I'm just saying.
Right. And the reality is that it's not a master's degree, you know, in human services. We get that. So I've been talking about this for a while. Finally, some folks with the United Way said, I'll tell you what, we agree with you. And they gave me, I'm not going to tell you what they gave me a lot of money, all right? And on May, we launched Ohio's first bricks and mortar recovery coach academy in Akron, Ohio. And we have trained, thank you. Keep it coming, man, because this is going to be, you know, the magnum opus. This is going to be the crown in my career. Because now I'm training class after class of force multipliers. Hundreds of people are applying. They know they're doing the best they can. Stifled laugh. Faces and Voices of Recovery, again, a terrific resource. Faces and Voices has any number of open-sourced technical support for any kind of recovery-oriented system of care you could think of. This is a go-to, again, for open-sourced, practical, useful information on recovery-oriented systems of care. I got to talk about art, because we have this gathering in Akron. Art is the oldest misfit at age 94 this year. And I met him, I have an operation in Florida as well, and I met him last year. And I mentioned that, you know, I was part of this big gathering, some of you know about it in Akron. Tens of thousands of people converged from all over the world. And I mentioned it to Art's Blind, by the way. I mentioned it to Art, yeah, we're going to go for Founders Weekend. And he's like, really? I've always wanted to go to Founders Weekend. So, of course, we had to put him on a plane. We brought him up, and trust me, 94 years old, this guy wore my team out. And he was crisscrossing the campus at, at lightning speed. So Art has the honor of being our oldest misfit today. Beautiful guy, beautiful man too. He's an Episcopalian priest in retirement. Just sweetheart of a human being. McShin, anyone familiar with McShin? Again, you know what McShin has? They actually have an open source recovery coach manual, free for the download. So, in terms of a resource, practical, useful stuff that you could forward, give to your prospective coaches, give to someone who you'd want to field. Now, I also think we are a nonprofit. The Packard Institute is, of course, a 501c3. I think the real story is that since we launched in 2007, we've been able to work with over 2,000 Ohio families. And to date, we have not taken a dime in taxpayer funding. And I think that's a story that needs to be told as well. Now, all love to the United Way, man. That has really we've been able to take that next sort of a quantum leap forward with the recovery coach and resources. And again, as of 16 June, just last week, we're fielding coaches in the emergency room, in that dark moment of need, moment of crisis. Recovery Coach Manual, it's awesome. I'm going to actually click out of this, bear with me. Okay. Did mention. I did mention the rivers. Last year we were out in the Tuscarawas River, we had put in at Barberton, Ohio, and this was myself and a group of 6 or 7 others, and we had this sort of Huck Finn kind of idea that we would wend our way down to the Ohio River, and then all bets were off. So we're somewhere in Stark County at the time, and we're kayaking down the Tuscarawas River, and again, we're talking about our journey, right? Because this is the metaphor for recovery. And I'm in the lead kayak. I'm with my dog Pi on the bow, Pi, P-I, and Pi spots something downriver. And I strain my eyes and I see what looks to be possibly a beaver swimming circles. Now the riverbanks were sheer at this point. We get a little closer and it turns out to be a baby calf swimming circles in the middle of the Tuscarawas River. And again, the sides of the riverbanks were sheer and muddy such that calf could not gain purchase. And we heard its mother mooing her head off. You know, the poor calf is circling in the river. But I mean, okay, I'm with a bunch of city boys, right? And I've got a GoPro on my hat, right? Oh yeah, we'll get to that, honey. Let's see if I can. There we go. No, that's not it. Thank you, honey. By the way, Magdalena is the shark whisperer. There we go. So I click the GoPro on. And again, you can see the banks are just, the baby calf does not gain purchase. Pi jumps in immediately, right? Now, I don't know how we're going to top this one, but it took us 45 minutes in the mud, waist deep, to get that calf up and out. Anyways, the Tuscarawas River. So I had a crew with me from the city of Los Angeles, like city boys, right? I didn't know what to say after this. I looked around at them and I said, yeah, man, Ohio life. C-car, man, this is my personal sort of brain trust in terms of our Recovery Coach Academy. The model we use, I think, is the most useful. It is certainly the most reciprocated. So we can train in Akron, and we can train in Newport Richey, Florida, and the states accept the C-car model as their core training requirement. We are training in Akron right now. If you have candidates, we are willing to train Ohio candidates with almost full scholarships. So again, it is my go-to in terms of a researched, validated, and they breathe life into this model every year. And it really has been able to energize our coaches. Okay, the Shark Whisperer. Maka, you want to set this up? You know, one thing, when we take women out with us, all bets are off, right? I mean, we challenge our women in ways they might not have had opportunity. You know, when I was a paratrooper, I jumped with women, right? So I'm not going to shortchange anyone for this therapeutic experience. So almost exactly this time last summer, you go ahead, Maka, and tell them about it.
Well, we were on a boat trip with our friends, Natalie and Scott, I believe their names. Mm-hmm. And they pointed out that there was like a shark or a fish, they weren't sure, over behind the boat. So me and Terry jump out and following. She goes down, picks up, and sees that the shark was stabbed in the head by like one of those spear guns. And she picks it up and swims it to health, and I help her and I pet it. It was almost like sandpaper. But soon we had to leave, and then we saw some fishermen right after we left going over to it and pointing their guns at it again.
Well, you tried, but hold your applause on this one. This is, of course, I had a GoPro on, right? This is off the coast where we are in Newport Richey, Florida, the nature coast, they call it. Now, to see your 8-year-old swim down and revive a shark, I gotta tell you, I have to tell you, my dear, that was bold. Now you can applaud. Again, we've hiked the Appalachian Trail. We kayak everywhere we can put a boat in, certainly. So again, it's about transformation. It's about hijacking the brain back and experiencing pleasure, even if you really got to go hard. Like re-experiencing pleasure along your brain's natural continuum, or ability to experience pleasure. Full disclosure here, brass tacks, which is SAMHSA's go-to for recovery support, technical support. I have to put this up there because I have been able to peel some stuff off of them, but if you can get a phone call returned, you're doing better than I can. And that is an indictment of our government. So, since everyone else is on blast. A couple of things, social media, if again, with recovery support services, it's a little different than clinical counseling in terms of HIPAA and things I've scarcely done a group where 100 images don't upload in real time. So personally, I feel we should honor confidentiality to the spirit of things, but that's just not the world in which we live. And to say that it is, and to become an expert on HIPAA would be a little disingenuous of me. We've scarcely done a group or outing where 1,000 images don't immediately go up into space. And if I think for a minute the government doesn't know exactly where I am, I would be deluding myself. So, I'm not a grassy old guy, believe me, but at the same time, I practice what we call radical acceptance, which at its very center, radical acceptance is the inability or the ability to stop fighting reality. So hop on, like the Institute, like PITV. We upload, every experiential, every outward bound, every powerful shamanic fireside kick-ass thing goes up on PITV, and we've got like a 3-year litany of resources, templates, ways to integrate these practices in real time. In fact, we'll wind up on it tonight. So, PITV in the Packard. Feel free to friend me, Renard Dean Packard. We, again, per Johann Hari, the opposite of addiction might not be sobriety. It might be connection, and it's going to take us connecting. So feel free to Instagram, whatever, Facebook. Finally, next week we're going to Florida. No, we're going to Texas. And part of what, right? Part of what I've done this last year is I've trained as an ultralight pilot, powered paramotor and ultralight pilot. So our motto for this summer is going to be, right? We are trying to hijack the brain to provide a neurochemical experience such that it's equal to or greater than the compelling nature of opiate drugs. A neural pathway. powered paramotor. It falls under FA 103, which is no license required, right? You just got to be a complete, maniac. This is over Lake LBJ outside of Austin. So again, it's about 5-minute warning. Thank you, dear. It's about going public and changing the narrative, reducing stigma, changing it. I've covered a lot of ground here, and it's hard to do in a 60-minute presentation. So we will do some questions, both from the internet. We're hemorrhaging our humanity here. We are losing. Just this last year between Chris Cornell, of course, and Prince, and we're losing a generation. So I invite you along on the recovery revolution, because you can make that critical. You can make that critical difference. You can be the agent of change in ways the old paradigm simply can't. And I'm going to need a volunteer. Good. You're volunteering? How about right here? Young lady, can you join us? All right. Could you take these? What do you see?
Dimes.
How many?
2.
There's 2 dimes. Can you place them on the table, please?
The same way you hand it to me?
Right there on the table. Now with your index and middle finger, I want you to put one over each dime. Okay. Can you move those dimes over to here, please? With your fingers on them? Correct. All right. Lift your fingers. What is that?
Paradigm shift.
That's a paradigm shift, yes! Good one. Right? And that is what Building Tribe is about, this workshop is about. Just different ways of looking at things. I by no means have all the answers. I'm so effing frustrated right now as a clinician, I can spit. At the same time, with this recovery-oriented systems of care, I'm seeing real change, meaningful change. Here's the key, enduring change. So I invite you along to the revolution. We have a couple minutes, questions? Right here.
Okay, this is not a question, I am a recovering alcoholic. I joined AA not because I knew I was an alcoholic, just because I met people like me. When I joined, I felt exactly, I found my tribe.
Very nice.
After finding my tribe, it took me 8 months to say, oh, now I know why I am like that. I'm an alcoholic, so I didn't join because I knew I was an alcoholic. I joined because I found my tribe. So I've been asking this question, how can we build tribes outside the rooms? This last weekend, you don't know what this means to me. Last weekend, we went rafting.
How about that?
31 people in recovery rafting together. We do it every year. This is my second only, doing it with them. One lady said, thank you, not to me, to the person who arrived. This is the first time in my life, she's 26, that I do enjoy something sober. 26-year-old, first time ever. We came back on Sunday, and that night I got my 3-year coin.
You're doing the deal, soul sister. Right here.
What are the qualifications for a recovery coach?
Qualifications, certainly there are no baseline. Obviously, this is part of that paradigm shift. The old school model, I know the Ohio integrated model is, I think you have to have a year or 2-year clean. Obviously, the more.
They don't anymore.
Did they throw it out? Throw it out?
Mass got rid of it. You can fill out an application
Right.
online on Mass's website.
Right.
And apply to be one, and then you wait for a training to become available in your area. Most of the recovery boards are hosting them right now. And you take the 40 hours, do the 16 hours online, you take a state test. And then you receive a certification no different than any other
Thank you. And it'll be different next week, but thank you very much.
We have to comply, OMS has to comply with Medicaid, because now that peer support is a Medicaid billable service, and if our agency is billing Medicaid for peer recovery services, it has to maintain its integrity that way.
Thank you. That's awesome to know.
There's time for one more question.
Right here.
Yeah, I was just wondering what suggestions you have for people who are not in recovery to advocate for and be a part of the recovery process.
Well,
And
this-
I'm privileged to know the connection that I had growing up, so I'm not in recovery.
Great.
but-
Well, that's a terrific question, and thank you for reminding me. And this is part of the paradigm shift, folks, because the CCAR definition of recovery is you're in recovery when you say you are. This is the paradigm shift. And in terms of our training model, if you're a family member, you're in recovery. You know, if you're a significant other on that healing path, you're in recovery. And we will train people. We, in answer to your earlier question, what are the qualifications? We look at every applicant individually. And if we feel that this person or this young lady, whoever needs to be in the field, then we do that. Now, very briefly, part of this United Way funding has allowed us to open a bricks and mortar recovery coach support center in Akron. And that's the key piece. That's the ongoing supervision. It's not a master's degree. This is the ongoing, we offer donuts, we have a chaplain, you know, let's look at the needs. And that's a key piece, because I had a girl come to me and she said, you know, the big gorilla just hired my entire class. 30 days later, she was the last man standing. Do you hear what I'm saying? High mortality rate among coaches. So we've got to be very judicious and mindful in fielding our people and supporting them. And that's the piece, that's the key piece right there. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, guys, I have your OPEC code. It's OPEC 1. OPEC 1.